Hello everybody, this is the second of three videos about the Old English epic poem Beowulf. Who doesn't like a good sequel? You kill the bad guy in the first movie, and then in the next movie, it turns out the bad guy had a brother who's even worse, or a vengeful best friend, or even a mother. Yes, it's round two for Beowulf. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the mead hall, Grendel's mother is picking up where Grendel left off, sowing terror and bloodshed, and even kidnapping Hrothgar's friend, Ashir, and carrying him back to her swampy lair. Sequels are fun for two reasons. On one hand, you get to experience many of the same thrills from the original story, and on the other hand, you get to see how the original story is reimagined in new ways. In the Grendel's mother sequence of Beowulf, we get a lot of the same beats as we got in the Grendel sequence. The monster strikes at night, Beowulf volunteers to defeat the monster, Beowulf prepares to fight the monster, and then fights the monster and wins, just like old times. But a good sequel always does something extra. It explores the world of the story more deeply. It presents a new level of challenge for the hero. It casts a new symbolic slant over the whole world of the story. The Grendel's mother sequence does all of these things. The story takes us beyond the walls of Heorot to explore the strange landscape of the Beowulf verse. Grendel's mother turns out to be much more formidable than Grendel, and Beowulf's struggle with her is much more two-sided than his handy trouncing of Grendel had been. And most importantly, the whole narrative atmosphere of the Grendel's mother sequence transforms Beowulf's exploits from the rough-and-tumble wrestling match of Part 1 into a much more surreal and dreamlike register. In this section, the poem feels like it becomes less about politics and ideal Viking behavior, and it becomes more elemental, like it's suddenly a story about life and death. For one thing, Grendel's mother can be thought of as the source of Grendel. If in Part 1 Grendel was a symptom of evil, the encounter with Grendel's mother is a journey into the root and cause of evil. The fact that Grendel's mother runs off with Grendel's arm suggests that her act of violence is consistent with the cycle of violent pattern that always lurks in the background of the Beowulf story. The idea that a victory against your enemy almost always only lasts until the enemy comes back and gets their revenge against you by killing more of your people, and the same thing goes on and on for centuries across dozens of Scandinavian clan groups in ways that guarantee a perpetual state of war. The fact that Grendel's mother kidnaps Ashir suggests that she is inviting the cycle to continue, embodying the nightmare of endless death and conflict. Indeed, Grendel's mother's backstory takes us back to the origin of evil in Cain's murder of his brother Abel, the first murder as described in the book of Genesis. It is suggested that Cain might be Grendel's father, but it is also suggested that Grendel has no father and no lineage, that he's a member of a race of fatherless creatures, and their whole ancestry is hidden in a past of demons and ghosts. Grendel's ambiguous ancestry, it might be mentioned in passing, contributes to the sense that he is the antithesis of the paternalistic values of Beowulf's human characters, who are always positioning their own identities with reference to their tangled genealogy. Grendel's lack of paternity also suggests that Grendel's mother breeds monsters asexually in a kind of nightmare version of female reproductivity. Literary critics who study Beowulf have often interpreted the figure of Grendel's mother as a nightmare representation of femaleness itself. Grendel's mother can be thought about as a personification of all the misogynistic mythologies that patriarchal warrior society harbored and repressed and feared and fantasized about. She can be read as a symbol of the monstrous mother, the femme fatale, the deadly woman who threatens to emasculate young men, taking away their power with her uncanny feminine energies. Beowulf's encounter with Grendel's mother has been read as a metaphor for birth, or sex, or death, or maybe all three at the same time. The sense of these archetypal mythic associations is only heightened by the appearance of the swamp where Grendel's mother lives, which is one of the most uncanny landscapes in all of world literature. The water burns. The bottom of the swamp has never been sounded. A deer being chased by wolves would rather face the wolves than go into the swamp. A dirty surge is always bubbling up in the water. It's filled with monsters and blood. When Beowulf's men spear a sea monster and pull it out of the water, the scene is described as a monstrous lake birth, an image that conflates the usually opposite poles of birth and death. Grendel's mother has put out a grisly welcome sign for Beowulf and his men, Ashir's severed head. As strange as Grendel was, We are now on a whole new level of strangeness. I know this isn't exactly what the Beowulf poet had in mind, but to me, the description of Grendel's mother's swamp reminds me of looking back into the dawn of animal evolution, or even looking into a microscope at the creatures that live in a drop of water. The water was infested with all kinds of reptiles. There were writhing sea dragons and monsters slouching on slopes by the cliffs, serpents and wild things such as those that often surface at dawn to roam the sail road and doom the voyage. I know. The Beowulf poet didn't know about dinosaurs or protozoans, but I feel like there is some similar evocation of something primitive, the elemental stuff of biology and creatureliness. Life is beautiful, but it's also strange and a little scary to think about how all of human identity, culture, and accomplishment is existentially dependent on the mysterious processes that take place inside our cells in the earliest history of biological evolution, in the strange fact of bodily existence. When Beowulf descends into this biogunk, he is exhibiting a more profound and philosophical kind of bravery, you could argue, than he did facing off against Grendel and Hierot. It's like he's confronting the profound and disturbing mysteries of life itself. Beowulf seems to intuit that he has to up his game, so this time, instead of dramatically removing his armor, he dramatically suits up in helmet and mail shirt, and strangely, he borrows a sword from, of all people, his frenemy, Unferth. The sword, named Hrunting, has a prestigious lineage, and everyone has a lot of confidence in it. With Hrunting, Beowulf predicts, I shall gain glory or die. Grendel's mother is a much fiercer opponent than her son. Shortly after Beowulf dives into the swamp, she clutches Beowulf in her grip so tightly that he would have been killed without his armor, and his arms are pinned so that he can't use his weapons. She drags him through swarms of sea monsters to her lair beneath the swamp, where she appears to have some kind of cave den. When Beowulf goes on the attack, Hrunting turns out to be useless. Is it a symbol of Unferth's treachery and false friendship? Or a sign of Beowulf's own fallibility? Or, as Freudian critics have said, a symbol of Beowulf's impotency? Beowulf doesn't stop to think about it. He resolves to wrestle Grendel's mother, as he did with Grendel, but she's too strong for him. She pins him down and tries to stab him with a knife. The armor saves him again. Miraculously, Beowulf sees a giant sword among Grendel's mother's cave things, which he uses to kill Grendel's mother and then collect Grendel's head as a trophy. When Beowulf makes it back to the surface of the swamp, the sun comes out, the sea monsters disappear, and strangely, the blade of the mysterious giant sword melts, leaving only the elaborately carved hilt. There are a lot of interpretive questions to work through here. The failure of fronting, the meaning of Beowulf's armor, the symbolic significance of the sword that Beowulf finds, and the uncanny surprise of its melting. Readers and thinkers have been sorting through these issues for many centuries, and now it's your turn. The one thing we can say for certain, however, is that this whole sequence has a strange dream logic that elevates the thematic scope and interpretive possibilities of the entire poem. It's almost like we had to meet Beowulf in part one and get to know him a little bit before he could take us on this psychedelic journey in part two into the recesses of his own unconscious or the primordial spaces of elemental being or wherever it is that he's taken us in this sublime sequel. And what do you know? Beowulf has done it again. He's a hero. Certainly, Hrothgar is required to make a grand speech to celebrate Beowulf's monumental victory. What do you have to say to the brave champion, Hrothgar? For a brief while your strength is in bloom, but it fades quickly, and soon there will follow illness, or the sword to lay you low, or a sudden fire, or surge of water, or jabbing blade, or javelin from the air, or repellent age. Your piercing eye will dim and darken, and death will arrive, dear warrior, to sweep you away. Yippee! Another happy ending from the Beowulf poet.